Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Play It Forward and Happy New Year. I'm Allison and you are listening to WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. I'm here with Chloe, Taylor, and Ishrat and a very special guest we will be introducing momentarily. So special shout out to Aisha. Woohoo, we miss you. She'll be back in the studio with us on our next show. So welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Good. It's a new start to a new year. Looking forward.
Yeah, new things. Spring will be here soon. It's good stuff. Yeah, so here's Chloe to tell you a little bit about our show.
So every 2 weeks we discuss the fentanyl opioid crisis that's plaguing our nation. What is fentanyl? Many Americans actually amazingly don't know what this drug is, which is very lethal. It's a synthetic bullet agonist opioid that can be used to treat severe pain. It's often used in like a hospital setting with surgery and stuff like that. It's a Schedule II controlled substance, and people aren't supposed to have access to that unless they have a prescription. Unfortunately, though, today there's an epidemic where too many people are dying early due to fentanyl poisoning. In 2022, the U.S. government sees enough fentanyl to give everybody a lethal dose, which is an average of 289 people dying every single day, which is just, it's so sad and it's absurd, and yeah, it's got to stop.
One way of looking at that is that a number equates to a plane crash a day. If that were occurring, the media coverage would be much, much more. The Play It Forward project brings this issue to light. From June 2020 through May 2021, there were over 100,000 overdose deaths. 2/3 were from fentanyl and synthetic opioids. Those stats are up 30% from the year before. On Long Island alone, there has been a 30 to 40% increase in opioid deaths, and heroin and cocaine use is up 50%. This issue has gone from bad to worse. These are startling numbers, and we as a group feel it is so incredibly important to share this pertinent information. I invite Ishrat to continue.
According to the United States Drug Reinforcement Administration, just 2 milligrams of fentanyl is a lethal dose. That's the size of 5 grains of salt. Only 10 grains of fentanyl could kill 500 people, and last year 40% of all counterfeit pills were lethal. Let's see, among teens, illicit fentanyl accounted for 77% of adolescent overdose in 2021. We plan on coming up with updated numbers for the past year 2022 in our next show, hopefully. In today's world, illicit fentanyl is now the number 1 cause of death among adults ranging from the age of 18 to 45. So now that we are armed with some general information about this invisible enemy, we can discuss the specifics. Here's Allison to introduce our guest for today.
So I am so happy and we're excited and thrilled to introduce David Manheim. Dave is a recovering heroin addict who's been sober for over 7 years now and has a very successful podcast called Dopey that is about to break 9 million downloads and gets over 160,000 downloads a month. He describes his show to be a dark comedy on drug addiction and recovery, plus all the dumb, not allowed to say this word on the air, but I'll say stuff. He has featured Mark Maron, Jamie Lee Curtis, Killer Mike, Danny Trejo, Artie Lang, Wayne Kramer from the MC5, Kristen Johnston, Mackenzie Phillips, Patty Shamel from Hole, Carolyn Mountain Girl Garcia, and many, many others. He has also been featured on This American Life, Vice, The Hollywood Reporter, the BBC, and Mank Maron's WTF podcast. Wow. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dave. So you met our focus group. They are here to ask you some questions. Here's Ishrat to start.
Hey, Ishrat.
Hello, I'm so excited to meet you. The first question, let's start with that. So please tell our listening audience about your podcast and how you use humor in your show, and that has inevitably helped a lot of people.
Okay, we started the show many years ago now. We started the show in 2015,
Wow.
and I like humor. You know, I kind of naturally use humor just because I like to. At the time, I had made a weird web series. I was a waiter at a deli in Manhattan called Katz's, and I wanted to do. We did a web series about a guy who wants to have a talk show, so he does a talk show while he waits tables, and it was called The Last Jewish Waiter, and it got a ton of attention, and my friend was like, I want to do something funny and cool, and I was like, well, you can't do anything. But then I remembered he had really crazy drug stories, and I had met him in rehab, actually. We were both IV heroin addicts, which shouldn't be funny, but for some reason it was, and I was like, come over, and we'll tell the stories. You'll tell your stories, and I'll make fun of you, and I'll tell my stories, and we'll make fun of what we do in our life, and that's what we did.
That's amazing, and that's great how you have used humor as a coping skill, and that I'm sure resonates with a lot of the viewers and the listeners you have as well. But following up on that, have you faced any difficulties in using humor to address such a serious issue that's going on in the world, and have you faced any backlash because of that or something?
Yes. In the beginning, we didn't even want to talk about recovery. We only wanted to talk about addiction. We wanted the show to be called War Stories and only be about. They call using stories war stories in the recovery universe, and I wanted the show to be called War Stories, and it was only going to be war stories because in recovery meetings they don't want you to tell war stories, but war stories are very entertaining and also, there's a guy called Artie Lang who was a comedian who was on the Howard Stern show, and he would tell crazy stories, and I kind of wanted it to be like that. And in the beginning, we got a little bit of backlash, but I think the world of recovery can be so sanctimonious that people found it refreshing that we wanted to be funny. And I still get backlash, though. Someone just wrote me, like, people are just, like, ridiculous a little bit. Someone wrote me, they were like, I want to come on your show and tell my inspirational story. And I was like, well, why don't you send me a funny voicemail of something crazy? And he goes, I don't think this stuff is funny. And I was like, well, then why are you writing me? So once in a while, there's a backlash, but mostly people have been supportive because they know that I'm in recovery, Chris was in recovery, and the audience is either in recovery or on the fence, and the humor is kind of what protects them, I think.
That's amazing. So, tell us about how your show has evolved over this time to the great platform that you have now.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the show.
Well, the show evolved tragically, really. You know, like, we started the show. I wanted the show to be like the Howard Stern show. Chris had a ton of crazy stories. I had a ton of crazy stories. And then once we started hearing from the audience would send in stories, which I loved. And we would read emails and we'd play recordings from the audience. And then we'd bring our friends on who usually were addicts in recovery or just like friends who could tell funny stories about us. And then, like, we had a couple of celebrities here and there because the show grew and because, like, just weird coincidences, like celebrities would be at Katz's and then they would come on the show and it turned out they were addicts in recovery. It was weird. Like, there's this famous rap group called House of Pain. They had this big song. You guys are very young. But
I
they
know.
had a giant song in the 90s called Jump Around. And if you go to any sports...
Jump, yeah.
They play Jump Around. But this guy was like a guy at Katz's, and I knew that he toured with some really big hip-hop groups that were crazy stoners, if not drug addicts. But it turned out the day he decided to come on Dopey was his 12th year in recovery. And it was just a coincidence. You know, it was just one of those weird kind of confluences that happened.
Wow.
But the show really evolved because Chris died, which, you know, he was relapsing and nobody knew about it, and he overdosed. But before he died, we had like 3 other people die. And just before Chris died, one of my very best friends died from an overdose, and his name was Todd, and he was somebody that I did a ton of drugs with. And when he died, the show changed. Like, I couldn't do the show in the exact same way. I think Chris and I, it was amazing that it was a miracle that we lived through what we lived through as it was, and that we didn't have a lot of death in our using. Like, we didn't know a lot of people that had died, so we could kind of be idiotic a little bit and be jerk-offs. And then when my friend Todd died, I got very serious. And Chris was using, so he didn't really understand. He just couldn't really make the leap, you know what I mean? And then, like, within a month and a half, he died. And then the show got pretty depressing for a while. But I made it a commitment that I wasn't going to do the show if it sucked or if it wasn't fun. And we met, and I also knew that the audience, like, kind of counted on the show. The audience was never huge. I mean, it can sound huge, but it's not really huge. But just the idea, I always wanted to have a talk show. And here I had a talk show, and I had an audience that counted on the show every week. And they were also addicts. And a bunch of them were in recovery, and we helped a bunch of them. So if I stopped making the show, that wouldn't have made any sense. And the show turned out it didn't suck, and it was fun still, even though all that stuff happened.
Congratulations for that. That's an amazing story.
Can you tell us about Dopey Nation?
Yeah, sure. Dopey Nation. Okay, so it's funny because half of the show was us making fun of doing a show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, the idea was like, it was funny that we were doing a show. I mean, the first 50 episodes, you see Allison's laptop. We didn't have a microphone. We just talked into the laptop. The microphone on the laptop.
Oh, wow.
That's the first 50 episodes. Me and Chris sat in front of and I was like, we're not buying equipment, because if we buy equipment, we're not going to actually do this. You know what I mean? Like, you buy skis and you never learn how to ski.
Yeah.
You buy a guitar and you never learn how to play it or whatever. And I didn't want that to happen with this. So I made this I was like, we're not buying equipment. And we did like 50 episodes, and then he was like, we got to buy equipment. And because we bought some horrible mic that wasn't really any better than that. And then we wound up buying, we had Dr. Drew on years ago, and it's funny because Dr. Drew's actually on tonight again.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out.
But years ago we had Dr. Drew on, and that's when I had to buy actual equipment because I didn't want Dr. Drew to see our horrible stuff. But the reason there is a Dopey Nation is because we would make fun of every aspect of the show. I don't know if I said "Stay Strong, Dopey Nation" before or after Chris said "Toodles" the first time, but I said "Stay Strong, Dopey Nation" like it was a joke, like I was a preacher. I was like, "Stay strong, Dopey Nation," or like there's like Lakers Nation or like fan groups. And I was making a joke, but it stuck, you know. And it was like, it was a joke that stuck. And now Dopey Nation is our fans, and there's a very active Facebook group called Dopey Nation, which is a fan page with like 5,000 people on it. There's like a ton of people with dopey tattoos, and they do a Dopey Nation Zoom every day. There's 26 Zooms a week that's hosted by people in the
That's
Dopey
amazing.
Nation. And you know, you guys should, if you're an addict out there listening, you should go to Dopey Nation Facebook and go to the Dopey Nation Zooms. The whole idea of Dopey is to create a sort of look into recovery and addiction that is not sanctimonious and not pretentious and basic and relatable. So it's like people, I mean, I am in 12-step recovery, but there's a ton of people who don't.
It doesn't
like
work
it.
for them,
They
yeah.
don't like it. And like we don't offer a program, but we offer a kind of zone where we talk about addiction and recovery in a way that should be hopefully accessible.
That's an amazing platform and format that you have. Go ahead, Taylor.
Tell us about your most successful podcast.
That's an interesting question because I'm not sure I know the answer. But I do know the answer of our most successful podcast. Oh, I do actually. The most listened to podcast was the episode after Chris died. Chris died, and people were like, do you want to keep making the show? And like I said, I did. But I wasn't sure how I was going to do that episode. Like, I was like, maybe I'll just do a 10-minute episode and announce that he died. And then it had turned out that his girlfriend had found his body, and she knew how much Chris loved making Dopey. And I was like, do you want to come on the show and say what happened? Which was kind of a crazy thing to do. I mean, he died on like a Monday, and I think we recorded it on a Wednesday, and we put it up on the Friday. and that was the biggest episode we ever did.
That was in American Life, right? There was a
was in-
portion of that
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah, I listened to that and her calling in, actually.
Yeah, and she actually got married, I think, a year and a half ago, and just had a baby. So, and she's a doctor. She works in the Bronx, so she's doing well.
Wow. What an amazing story.
You have a tenacity to speak to those who are in a bad place. What do you think that captures the attention of this audience?
Well, I think it's funny that you asked that, because the biggest show this year, or last year, was this kid from Sayville, and his name is Jay. He's somebody I knew from 12-step meetings, and we called him Fentanyl Jay because he was this crazy fentanyl dealer, and he got busted in Ohio selling 5,000 hits of fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
And now, like, he's looking at this crazy jail time, and he was a very polarizing figure, but he's like one of the most magnetic people I ever met. He's 27. He's obviously very scared, and you know, like, I think shows like that are super real, and you know, it's hard to say what it means. Like, he's not exactly in touch with the horrible stuff that happened, but the audience could kind of sense how powerful his story was, and he's also very funny. So I think, I don't know, I don't remember the question, but that's my answer.
You know, yeah, that's pretty amazing. We talk about this often, that there needs to be, honest, raw reality when you're talking about this subject, right? The good and the bad, right? I mean, the bad, I honestly think, should be talked about, because, you know, hopefully it will stop somebody from making those poor choices, or, you know, I really think that being as raw and honest, you know, through the good and the bad is so important in talking about this problem, right?
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my goal with the show, and it always comes off the wrong way when I say this, but my goal with the show is to create a show that's entertaining. And, like, for me, being dishonest isn't entertaining.
No.
Being honest and real is captivating, and you want to hear people's stories. The fact that we've managed to actually help people is great. But I like to make the show because I enjoy the process.
And that wasn't the original premise of your show, right? I mean, it kind of inadvertently turned out to be. Didn't you say in that interview that you actually changed the from comedy, right, to genre to self-help?
Yeah, but we did that because we weren't doing well in the. It was like a joke. I remember I was on the phone with Chris, and or maybe we were driving across Manhattan, and he was like, the comedy charts are really hard to crack. He was like, what if we did self-help? And I was like, that's the funniest thing I ever heard. we became a self-help podcast because we could chart in the self-help charts where we didn't think we could chart in the comedy.
Amazing.
And we thought it was high comedy for us to be self-help. But the weird irony is that it wound up kind of being self-help.
Well, that was kind of what I find fascinating about your story. Yeah.
Can you speak about how, like, doing this podcast and using humor as somebody in recovery connects you and helps you in your own recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in recovery, talking to people who are in recovery is like a huge part of being in recovery, and being able to I mean, it keeps recovery focused for me. I work a recovery program. I go to meetings. I have a sponsor. I sponsor people. But I think doing Dopey keeps it on the daily. It keeps me constantly talking about addiction and recovery and being connected to a lot of addicts in and out of recovery. So yes, it does help.
What would something that you would? What's one piece of advice that you would offer for somebody who's still, you know, using in the grips?
I would say, just take action. You know what I mean? Like, if you're using and you really want to stop, you got to ask somebody for help. You got to reach out to somebody. You got to talk to somebody. It's all action. Nothing is going to happen if you don't do anything.
Yeah. No, that's so very, very true. Do you ever get triggered? Like when you're listening as a person in recovery and you're like telling these stories and, you know, maybe in a sense reliving and hearing these funny things. Do you ever like think about like kind of like the good times and the crazy fun stuff, you know?
I think sometimes I know in the beginning we would both get triggered, and it was like almost funny when we would get triggered too. But that really like it played out so badly. I mean, Chris's death was such a horrible reality. I once in a while, we recently I interviewed these two doctors who actually give ketamine therapy, and I kind of got triggered when I talked to them because it was the idea that I could take drugs
medically
yeah.
in a medical setting.
It was a little bit triggering.
As somebody living with this potentially deadly disease, how does watching others die from this impact your own recovery?
I mean, I think that goes from a person to person kind of thing. I feel like I saw people dying on intervention and I used and I didn't really care.
Yeah.
Or I would watch like shows about addiction and I kept using and I didn't care. And now like my recovery is my life. And I think death is just a sad part of the puzzle. I don't know. I think it's really a person to person thing. I think when you're in recovery and you see someone die, it's just a hard fact of addiction and recovery. And if you're using, if somebody dies and it inspires you to stop, that's a good thing.
Oh, that's first of all, amazing story, amazing show. I'm really excited. I think everyone should tune into your show tonight. What time does it start?
I think it comes out. I mean, it comes out at around 8:30, but then it's available forever.
Okay. And I'm going to tell our listeners, where to go to listen to this.
Go
But
to dopeypodcast.com. or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just type in Dopey. It'll pop up.
all right. Well, I mean, Dr. Drew is a pretty prominent figure. So, you're obviously doing things right and, on your way to more continued success. So.
And my friend Ray is on, and he talks about having sex with a dwarf when he was doing meth. So that's on it, too.
Oh, wow. You really got an array of characters
That's
here.
gonna get a few more viewers. That mention.
Well, thanks again, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, so at this point, everyone knows of someone that has died this way, and it can be avoidable. Please educate one another. I feel that's the best way we can do, the best we can do at this time. I truly hope this new year brings better news and more solutions to this crisis. So, Dave, on behalf of my focus group and WUSB, we are so grateful to have you as our guest. We hope you come back. Continue success with your podcast, Dopey. You're awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. So, to our listeners, again, you could check out Dopey at dopeypodcast.com. Also, check out his story on the podcast, This American Life, by typing in your browser thisAmericanLife.org/667/radio/act-1-11.
Or just Google Dopey on This American Life.
Thanks, Dave. That was a little simpler. I'm like, oh boy, that's a long one. Last but not least, I want to give a special shout out to some wonderful folks here in the studio today. One special person extra, my husband, Mike. Thanks for helping me get around.
Shout out to Mike.
To my hip recovery.
You're welcome.
And one last one, super special thanks and gratitude to my orthopedic surgeon and friend, Dr. Barry Clayman, for giving me a new hip. Keep on playing, Barry, and keep on making us all hip. But last but not least, thank you again, Dave. And now here's Chloe to wrap up.
Thank you so much to everyone that supports this cause and understands how important it is not only to look out for each other, but also to empathize with anyone, who's struggling with addiction. And also please educate one another about the, unfortunately, new or threat fake fentanyl-laced pills that are being sold online and on the streets. The drug supply is tainted. People are dying at unprecedented rates, and this has got to stop.
It's got to stop. Go ahead, Ishrat.
I'm going to mention a few resources to our listeners, starting with SAMHSA's National Helpline. That's 1-800-662-HELP. help will be 4357. I'll repeat it, 1-800-662-HELP. And you can reach them via text message to help #4U. This is a confidential, free 24-hour service that's available 365 days in English and in Spanish, and for individuals and families facing mental and substance use disorders. There is LICAD, Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and it addresses the addictive climate of our times by providing initial attention to referral services to individuals, families, and children through intervention, education, and professional guidance. You can contact LICAD at their hotline number 631-979-1700, and also please visit LICAD's website at licad.org for more information.
Another resource for those who may not be ready for treatment is the Never Use Alone hotline. The Never Use Alone toll-free nationwide overdose prevention, detection, crisis response, and reversal lifeline services are for people who use drugs while alone. If you call their number, volunteers will stay on the line to make sure you don't become unresponsive, or they will send EMS, never the police. They have saved already 88 lives. Write down this number and save it in your contacts. It is 1-800-484-3731. Everyone,
Keep playing it forward. That's our little catchphrase, Dave. So this is Allison of the Play It Forward Project, and I hope you tune into our next hour-long show. We got a longer show now on February 17th from 1 to 2 p.m. You be sure to check out the WUSB annual Reggae Marathon happening February 3rd to February 5th. Thank you again, WUSB, our focus group, Aisha, Ishrat, Taylor, and, of course, our special guest, Dave. We will be closing the show. Oh, and Chloe!
She said Chloe. She said Chloe.
Oh,
You said Chloe.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
we'll be closing our show with a special song that Dave wrote himself that he closes his show with. And this is our first live performance in the studio, so
This is my first live performance in the studio, too.
he's going to crush it. Woohoo, Dave. You are listening to WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. Be well, everyone, and look out for one another. Take it away, Dave.
Do you think they can hear this?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I want to be good so bad. I want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I want to take a ride up in the sky. Watch those airplanes just pass me by. And I want to seal the air jetliner, take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's high noon where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's high noon where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind if I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And I want to call my dad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had.
All right.
Thank
Dave,
you.
that was really great.
Oh my God.
everybody, check out Dave's podcast, dopey.com. Have a great day.
Dopeypodcast.com.
Dopeypodcast.com. Have a great day, everyone.
That was awesome.
That was
Thanks.
amazing.